Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Okay, here we go. So, it's the 30th of December. If you're wondering why an end of year roundup is landing right at the absolute last possible moment, that's not inherently an accident. It's also not really been planned. It's kind of just Parkinson's law in full effect. The work expanding once again to fill all the time available. It is the end of the year, and I've managed to take an entire year to get an end of year episode ready. Very sort of on brand, you might say. I've decided to do this episode. We've done one like this before, kind of because it's the easiest way to answer a lot of stuff. And it's an episode, believe it or not, that we've been asked for, or I've been asked for quite a lot, publicly, privately, on stages, in messages, in person, on other podcasts. People asking me a little bit more for my own personal insight into the podcast or podcasting or like life and balance, into what we've actually been doing and into who we are when I say the word we. And also into me, how I think, what I've been focused on, what do I really think about certain stuff? Because I've answered questions to other people a lot of times, and I've kind of not, on reflection, and been entirely happy with my answers. And also, things change. What I believe now that maybe I didn't believe a year ago. So I've written a lot of these questions and concepts and thoughts down. And if I'm honest, part of the reason this took so long is because every time I answered those questions out loud to myself, I realized something uncomfortable. I'd like give an answer, then later write it down, like I said, and read it back and think, I'm not sure that's actually what I believe, or at least not fully. So this episode has kind of been 12 months in the making, but really it's sharpened over the last few weeks, I'd say. A lot of walking, a lot of thinking, a lot of showering, a lot of ice bathing, a lot of long cardio workouts, and spent a lot of time with family. So a lot of thinking, a lot of revisiting conversations, a lot of soundboarding off other people. And I've had again and again this year and asking myself, what do I really think about this? What do I really think about fire service, about leadership, about culture, about work, about happiness, about balance, about ambition, about responsibility, about being human inside systems that always don't make space for being human. And that's what this is. This episode is just me. It's a lot of me. It's me talking about the podcast, about what we've done, about how we've done it, about the people behind it, about the things that worked and the things that really didn't. It's me talking about the fire service, about tactics a little bit around science, a little bit around tradition, mostly around change. And it's also me talking a little bit about life, about success and failure, about saying yes to things, about saying no to things, about saying goodbye to people and phases of life that you didn't expect to end when they did. So if you've ever wondered how I've made some of the decisions I've made this year, how we've been able to achieve some of the things we've achieved, if that's good or bad, or maybe no one cares, but if you're listening still now, even this couple of minutes in, then I'm guessing you might want an insight. I'm going to be open about that. Not because I think it's the right way or performative, but because it's a way of doing it. There might be ideas, concepts, or little mental hacks in here that you can take away and use yourself. There's obviously no guarantees. There's no particularly big narrative arc. Typical ADHD, I'll jump all over the gaff, and if it's useful, take it. If it's not, throw it away. There's no neat bow tied around on this. It's probably going to be a long episode. It's going to wander around, and it's my reflections and the challenges, and probably full of contradictions, as I am a walking contradiction at times, because that's what people are. People do that. People are honest. So if you're here for a polished highlight reel, you're probably going to be disappointed that this probably isn't it. But if you're interested in how a year actually unfolds, when you're paying attention, then this might be useful. All right, let's go for it. So first stuff I'm going to come at you with is going to be a little bit machine gun fashion. Said it wasn't going to be a highlight reel, but I just want to dump a load of stuff on the table in front of us before I get into ideas, culture, leadership, any kind of bigger thinking, like woo-woo concept. So I'm going to ground the episode in a bit of reality because it's very easy to talk about concepts and forget that all of this happens inside and alongside real life. 2025 didn't look neat. It was a bit of a walking bin fire at times. I didn't arrive at any kind of clean narrative. It sort of came in waves, fast, slow, heavy, and some that just fucking completely knocked me on my ass, to be honest with you. Start of the year was some great travel, Rome with some loved ones, learning mode, back home in the fire service, some fire protection, work building designs. Got me thinking a lot about how risk is baked in long before fires ever start. And I don't think we have much of a concept around that generally. If I sort of wanted to measure myself and other operational colleagues, I don't think it's a concept we know enough about. I think probably think we do know a lot about it. I think it's a wide spectrum of knowledge to completely obliviousness. Kind of shifted how I see and think about the job. Made me realize how often we talk about tactics without talking about the conditions that those tactics necessarily exist in the first place. Changed roles at work twice this year, which is always interesting. Nothing exposes your blind spots. Quite like new responsibilities, new expectations, new relationships, even if these are revisited. I went from a non-operational role from operational for many, many years to non-operational, training school for a couple of years, different non-operational, back to non-operational, and then this year went to a different non-operational role and then back onto ops. But it's the whole kind of person never enters the same river twice because the person's changed and so is the river. So coming back out onto the job forced me to reflect on how I lead now, how I led in the past, the cringe-worthy, hateful way that I think of some of the ways that I tried to motivate, encourage people in the past, and just like major eye rolls on myself in the same way that perhaps I listen to the old episodes of the podcast and just think, Jesus Christ. So yeah, getting back into those modes that you're not fully comfortable back in yet, putting on an old set of clothes that you maybe haven't worn in a long time and kind of getting that feel for it. But also how quickly we can default to habits when you're under pressure, repeating some old bad behaviors. What else? Physically, the year started hard and kind of stayed quite complicated. A number of health challenges, prolapsed and bulging discs in the back, vascular vein issues in both legs, 2 surgical interventions for that this year, some hormonal challenges, and still like the ridiculous moron that I am, still went and did the High Rocks. So I think January, did a High Rocks with Helena Brown. I can have a quick glance at the diary. That was brutal, but equally brilliant in measure. Lastminute.com invite, as always, not because Helena's not planned, just because that's just the way life seems to manifest for me at times. But absolutely loved it. Yeah, I think it was in January. Great doing great things with great people like Helena. I like having friends like her, and she's just a representation of many of the incredible people in my life who make me a better person, operate at a whole different level. They kind of march into the beat of a different drum, and I love being around people like that. Shared effort, shared suffering, shared laughs, that kind of set the tone of do the hard things with good people. That's kind of like what I'm always looking for, which took me into what else physically? With the hybrid games, a Woodbank Stadium. That was in March, I think. Really, really, really community-based event. It was great competition. Wasn't about ego, shared experience, watching people push themselves further than probably even they thought possible. Never gets old for me. Quick one. We're working in collaboration with the Blue Light Show, a national conference and exhibition built around one thing. Blue light services do better together than apart. For learning, sharing, improving how we operate, it brings together fire, police, ambulance, and rescue all in the same place for actual proper conversations about leadership, operations, capability, and the challenges we are facing on the front line. It's about seeing what's possible, pressure testing ideas, and taking practical learning back into your organization. I'm going to be there 1st and 2nd of July 2026 at the event, getting involved with those conversations and connecting with people who really care about doing the job better across the blue light sector. Do not sleep on this. If you value collaboration over silos and you want to make insight into what's actually useful, Blue Light Show is the one to get in your diary. Visit www.bluelight.show. Book your spot. You will walk away with so many insights, fresh connections, and practical takeaways you can actually use day one back in the job. I'll see you there. Travel. We did a lot of travel. April. Just kind of going through the diary here. And I want to talk to you about going through the diary as well at some point, because I think there's an important concept to ask yourself there around what made you happy this year, what things you reflect back on and give you the moments of joy. So April took me out of the UK bubble to Gibraltar Fire Service. A proper reminder, job's way bigger than one service or one system or one concept. So many different contexts of how they operate over there. Staying with friends, Matt out there, incredible human being. Love the way he lives life, the decisions he makes, the things he's achieved. A really, really inspirational human being. If you don't know who he is, go and find him on social media. Matt Coulthard is his name. Not got a massive social media following or anything like that, but just a really incredible person. So he's Matt Fire 13 social media. Go and find him. Just to give you an insight into the different way that they live their life out there. Managed to get that trip with my partner Hillary, slowing down enough to actually notice where I was and the beautiful people that I was with. Really filled up the cup, which was needed a bit. Started out the year going through some rough stuff, getting to the end of a very long marital separation. We'll talk a little bit around that. For context, there was no overlap for anyone that's thinking. That'd have been probably 2 years deep by then, but just some things take longer. Later that month in March was a really, really cool professional adventure. The Netherlands took me for a trip out there alongside international fire behavior experts from all over the world. Ricardo Weaver, who we've had on the podcast before, took me out there for some smoke cooling experiments. That was really, really insightful to see the level of sort of specificity they do when they are putting these experiments together, the professionalism that they go about these things with. The NIPV, they've got some reports out there. You can go and find their website and you can find the smoke cooling experiments. So we're talking about bow method versus arc method versus gas cooling that we do a lot in the UK versus straight streaming. Effectively, the whole trip was built around a long corridor with temperature probes, a number of crews carrying out the same approach with the same level of fire attack, the same extinguishing media, same size of team, and really doing a sterile testing of the different sort of internal offensive options for firefighting. And when we're proceeding down, this was a long corridor. You can get the exact measurements on there. I think it was like 10, 12 meters, something like that. Sharp right hand turn at the end where the fire was located. Same fire loading every single time. And yeah, that gave me a real reminder about how important it is to play in the sandpit, to do rigid, intentional experimentation. It pulled me right back into thinking mode, standing alongside experts from around the world. It became possible to really immerse myself in, why do I think what I think? Why have I been conditioned to think that? Where's that come from? Is this my idea or one I've just inherited, as is most of our doctrine? I think in the UK Fire and Rescue Service, so much of it great. That's not me throwing salt. Steady, back on your box. It's just to ask ourselves, do I think this to be true? Do I believe this to be true? Or do I know it to be true? Like, have I actually got experiential knowledge of this concept that I'm applying, or is it just what someone told me? It really became impossible to ignore the gap between what we know and what we do. That tension, like internal battle, it's kind of sat with me all year. Okay, let's go on with the year. Pushed me into May. I'm going to miss loads of stuff here. Apologies for people that I've done some great stuff with. I did a triathlon. Have a look at them. That's a company where it's 20 minutes on, it's all done by Concept 2, 20 minutes ski, 20 minutes bike, 20 minutes row. Basically attempted, while carrying this bulging disc and vascular issues, to kind of go all out in my own physiology and learn a lot about my relationship with discomfort. It was wicked. I absolutely loved it. You're just redlining for a full hour, trying to look into what is your own lactic threshold, really holding up the mirror between who you think you are and what your body's truly capable of. It's just one example. I'm sure there's many, many ways to tap into that. But for me, I absolutely loved it. We won a regionals, got invited to nationals. But then later on, I had surgery on my legs, so was unable to do that. But it's certainly something I want to get back into if I can get my body to behave a little bit. Then we kicked into challenge mode. So there was the first Northeast Challenge in the UK Fire and Rescue Service. I didn't attend that one. We actually had Sarah Bromley, incredible human being, watch commander in the UK Fire and Rescue Service. She hosted solo for that one for the first time. Really, really proud of her. Watching people step up like that when given space to do so is one of the real quiet joys that I have. Seeing friends do incredible things and creating opportunities in any way that you can to help support them to do that. Sarah went out there, smashed it, representing the UK Pink Firefighters. Talk a little bit around them later. Austria was next on the list. Went out there with Rosenbauer, who showed me their new Panther Electric. Really, really incredible experience. Learned a lot about fire engines that I never knew before. For context, anyone doesn't know what I'm on about, you can go back in the socials and look at it. But Panther Electric's Rosenbauer's next generation and fully electric rescue and firefighting vehicle. It's used predominantly at airport fire services, or almost exclusively. Really, really impressive model. I was blown away by it. It's very, very special in that it combines the performance and capability of like world-class airport fire engines with a fully electric drivetrain. I've had a couple of electric vehicles in the last couple of years and was in two minds as to how convinced I was about them. But the Panther Electric really replaces the traditional diesel drivetrain in a very suitable environment. High voltage batteries, multiple like electric motors. It was just like incredible. It goes from 0 to 80 kilometers an hour in around 25 seconds, less than that, I think. I saw it on the road and got a chance to be in it, a few times around the track. It feels like technology in action. It was just ridiculous. And there must have been 20 something people went around in it that day. So it lasts a lot longer than you thought it would. And just a really, really incredible experience that gave me more faith in the future of this technology in the UK Fire and Rescue Service. So, and of course, further afield, Rosenbauer is an international company. But that was that trip. Panther Electric wasn't a gimmick. It was like a signal to the direction that I think we're heading in. And I thought it was great. Summer, there was a lot going on. Welsh Firefighter Challenge, family trips, theatre, lots of laughter, lots of time with people. Again, the Welsh Firefighter Challenge, many years deep now, secured itself as very much an incredible thing in the UK Fire and Rescue Service and played a big part. I love the way that Dom and Tim and the team look after me when I'm there. Probably the most included, I feel, in any of the challenges across the UK. It's a real, real incredible team. And then we rolled straight into the British. Boom. Wow. It was amazing. this year. I think we said like it's maybe they just seem to be getting better and better. 2026 has got some really, really exciting stuff planned for it, and hopefully will be my return back out onto the course as well. But the BFC is just the diamond in the middle of the crown. It's the pinnacle of UK Firefighter Challenge experiences, and it was incredible to have Duarte Mendes come over and really show us what's possible. He stormed the course, beating everybody by quite a margin. But it was really, really a testament to what's possible in the firefighting community. And so many of these things, the Welsh, the British, the Rosenbauer, the Netherlands trip, the stuff that we've talked about now, and I'm going to come on to lots more, are a real signal of what's happening when you step outside of the bounds that most of you won't even realize that you stood inside of your own organization. You'll ask for a lot of stuff. You'll get a lot of no's at times. Sometimes it's a flat no. Sometimes it's a not right now no. But you can still go and do the stuff, You just have to be bold enough, brave enough to go and put yourself out there and kind of take that risk. September, surgery on both legs again. That forced a lot of stillness. Good ways, bad ways. Recovery strips life back to basics. Really appreciate what you had and what you can lose. Like, it's not until you're sick you realize how great it is to feel healthy. During that time, I wasn't sitting on my ass doing nothing. I went to Manchester trips. Lars Axelsson, first time meeting in person. Had him on the podcast before. Incredible human being. Again, just shows you how much knowledge really exists if you're willing to get out there and stay curious. These people are traveling. These people are making trips. And it was really, really incredible to get that time with them. Also, before I jump forward, some of the stuff we've been getting involved in with some big things happening in the sector, some real moves. I mean, this year was the first year for the Blue Light Show as well in London, beginning of June. That, being part of that felt genuinely special. Not just because it was bigger, louder, shinier than like previous events, but because of what it represented. It was the first time the show landed properly in the capital. It's first big year, and you could really feel the energy straight away. Different services, different disciplines, different backgrounds, all in the same place, having real conversations rather than just walking past each other. For me, it really felt like a step change. Standing there, hosting on stage, speaking to people, meeting face to face, people I've only ever spoken to through headphones or heard on messages, or have said how much they enjoy the podcast. Those real conversations hit me how far this thing is sort of quietly traveled. The podcast started really small, informal, almost kind of like accidental, really. And then suddenly I'm in London, at national events and the Blue Light Show, talking to people who have literally built careers, teams, and whole entire services. I'm, around these people, and it's standing on the shoulders of giants. What really struck me was like the appetite for honest conversation, and not like sales pitches or slogans or surface level motivation, but people wanted to talk about actual leadership, not like performatively either. The mental load that this job takes on people. And then obviously some of my passions that we spoke around leadership and training, fire behavior, what's working, what's broken, what needs changing. There's moments during those events where I just kind of stood back and took it in, which I'm getting better at. The kind of scale of it, the conversations that were happening, the fact that people were giving their time and attention, and not because they had to, because they wanted to. They wanted to think, they wanted to challenge their own unconscious biases, and it reinforced something that I've felt more and more strongly this year than ever before, that when you create a space that values curiosity over certainty, people show up differently. Like rank just drops away, ego starts to soften, and people actually get quite honest, and we realize that no one has all the answers, no one is the expert, which often is how it feels to me. Maybe to you as well, when you're in your own organization. So yeah, I wanted to put that bit back in because the Blue Light Show in London felt again like a real nod towards where we're going. There's a room in this sector for depth, and that room is there so far as I can tell at the moment. And obviously we try to virtually create that room every week on the podcast, but people are hungry for substance. They have a big appetite for better thinking that hasn't gone anywhere before. So yeah, I found that energizing, affirming. It was one of those moments where I thought, okay, this is becoming a thing. People are listening. People want to do more of this, not because it's just big and shiny, but because it's useful. And that matters far more, I think. Whilst I'm here, I also went out to Germany with Gore-Tex. I had a Gore event in June, Munich, which was incredible. Tried out the new Hikes Fire Eagle and the Extra Guard. The event out in June was the first time with Gore-Tex and Hikes that we'd kind of been recognized as we say like media stuff, like media influence. It was actually a media event in Oberhausen, I think I'd say that right. We were trying out the Extra Guard Upper and the Hikes Fire Eagle. New pair of boots in them, ridiculously light. We used the Gore-Tex Paralon, the Gore-Tex Crosstech Pyrad, their stretch technology, which was mad. Like the way that stuff performs, the way it felt when we were out there, was just incredible. It made me really pull myself out of my bias around what fire kit should feel like, what boots should feel like. And it really just blew my mind, to be honest with you. They look banging. You'll see pairs of them on all of the UK Pink Firefighters, and you see the Fire Eagles on, a lot of Firefighter Challenge competitors now. That is for a reason. It's because it's the best. Then we also had the Emergency Services Show in Birmingham. That was a blur of conversations, ideas. Always fun to get there with the team. We had the South Coast Firefighter Challenge and the Northamptonshire Firefighter Challenge. They were in quick succession. But then personally, to bring it back there, behind all of that, life just kept happening. I moved house twice, rebuilt the podcast setup more times than I'd like to admit. And I had to give up my dogs. So that one still sits uncomfortable with me. 3 dogs, especially Kai, my German Shepherd. Don't have him with me anymore. So some parts of the year don't really come with like neat lessons. They just change you. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. October brought once again the National BA Challenge, catching up with lots of incredible people, getting again more consistent insights into the world of firefighting, tactical firefighting, fire behavior, tactical ventilation, the different approaches, and the huge buffet of success, failure, and different interpretations of national operational guidance and how that actually enacts itself on the fireground. National BA Challenge is a place of excellence. It's really incredible to be there. It's a real privilege to be there every year. And we brought 2 episodes away from that one. Hopefully you've been back and listened to them. Some really, really great insights. Lots of really interesting stuff, debriefs from all the teams there. Lots for you to get your teeth into. And then towards the end of the year, I was focusing on how do we go bigger? How do we move things forward? So this next bit, I'm going to go into a few things that are some personal reflections, and hopefully some of that will serve you as well. So behind all of that stuff, fed into what the podcast has started to become a little bit more this year. I mean, at the start of 2025, I didn't really sit down and decide to change anything about the podcast. It kind of just evolved, or has and is and was evolving, because the questions I was asking were probably a bit different. It was less performative. I like having conversations that draw us all a little bit deeper, which means they are less polished and a bit more honest. It stopped being more about episodes and started being more about conversations, probably, that I think needed to exist. Fire behavior has obviously sit quite a dominant theme for a lot of it, but not because it's fashionable because I think in the core of our job, it's very unavoidable, but I also wanted to cast the net wider. The science, the academics, the consequences of ignoring elements of the job as the spectrum of firefighters just becomes so much wider. I enjoy conversations with leaders, not because they're more or less important than anybody else, but it's less about rank and more about behaviors, more about culture. Their decisions can have bigger ripples than some other people. But just remembering they're all just human beings, you know, who feels safe enough to speak to them as humans. And I think a lot of people quietly stop trying when they can't get access or don't think they get the answers that they perhaps want or need. Adam from Drillbook, working very closely with the podcast, is just ramping up the incredible benefits that brings to the sector. Drillbook has just gone from strength to strength this year. We've started the academy, thousands of daily users, some conversations and procurement interview style stuff, which has gone on with a number of services about them taking it on as a training resource, which was ridiculous and something we never could have thought was possible with it. So you don't know what Drillbook is, go on to the App Store. You can access it for free. There's so much stuff in there that you'll find useful that hopefully, you can use on a daily basis. I know when I'm on station, I use the quizzes with the team on a regular basis. We go through daily quizzes. There's all the incident debriefs on there. There's quick reference guides. There's usable links. There's training ideas. There's obviously masses of drills. You can do flashcard, updates to see where your mental cognition is at, see if you can remember some of the stuff. It hits you with questions, and the flashcard style is you just flip them around and it gives you the answers. And this covers so many different services and organizations in the UK Fire and Rescue Service, and will give you insight into trauma skills, into interview questions, into all the acronyms in the fire service. We've got hundreds on there. I think it's an essential tool for anybody to use, and you can also add your own drills into it. So that's just gone from strength to strength. And 95% of that I have to lay at the feet of Adam, who is an incredible individual and was just building something that I think is going to be incredibly useful for current serving and also future fire service operators, firefighters at all levels of organizations, people that want to get into the job, people that are already in the job. Olivia, the elusive Olivia, joined the podcast this year. As things have continued to grow, recognized the need for more professional outfit, and rather than me just trying to mainline, do it, you know what I mean, and just burning the midnight oil, set myself on fire, to just trying to keep this thing moving forward. Olivia is an incredible human being, very intelligent, very professional, and very good at balance and how she goes about execution. She's our lead on a lot of our partnerships, and she came in as an immediately lifted the effectiveness of myself and the podcast and everything we're doing just across the board. We've got some incredible things happening next year, and much of that success has to be laid at the feet of her, if I'm totally honest. It became a lot clearer and I think this is actually a good one to think about, thinking about who you are and who you're not. What is the podcast not about? It's not about chasing algorithms. It's not trying to be everything to everyone. We're interested in depth over noise. We're not really bothered about social media follows or clickbait or anything like that. It's an eternal resource that we're trying to create. We're trying to make something that will be useful for firefighters over time. We're trying to capture these conversations in almost like time capsules, audible time capsules, and burying them in the internet to serve everyone and anyone for free. We're talking about legacy, talking about a legacy resource, and that substance over spin and flash in the pan and clickbait and jumping around with our tops off or controversy or whatever, those conversations that might not be super exciting all the time, might not be comfortable, but I believe are necessary. And who am I to judge it? But the success of it seems to be proving that it's useful in some capacity. And I'll lay all the sort of credit for that at the guests, the people that have been willing to come on, get over themselves, and be part of this conversation. Another thing I'm incredibly proud of is the UK Pink Firefighters. So that has grown tremendously alongside the podcast this year. We've got over 100 applicants, I think, this year to join. And thanks to hikes and MSA, we've managed to bring on 5 new members in 2026 as we step into it now. We've got an ambassador program. We've got real fundraising efforts. We've got a massive list of events that are happening over the next year. Again, I direct you to go and find the UK Pink Firefighters on social media. Go and find the website, new website design from Taz. All of our events are there, and just seeing what all the new and existing members have been getting into has just been like ridiculous. Like there's just a ridiculous team of Avengers. Most people you'll probably know, I've got a big thanks to Dean and Ryan and the work that they've done. We've got new members joining the team. We've had Bronte Jones, we've had Siobhan Priest, we've had, Ronnie Sharrett, we've had Taz McGuire, we've got Teresa Waplington, and then we've got so many great ambassadors as well. We've got Ash, Barnaby, Jade, James Jordan. I'm just going to try and pull them up now so I don't forget anybody. Kieran, Lucy, the OGs. We've got Rob, always been part of the team. We've got Ryan Payne, Sarah Bromley, of course, Sasha Weaver, Scotty Hewson, for our ambassador program. We're in the 9/11 challenge, which is another thing I'm massively proud of that we're involved in this year. Well, Simon Phillips, long-term friend of the podcast and what he's doing in the sector and stepping into the ambassador roles as well is a real privilege. We've got Kerr, we've got Detty, we've got Georgina. There's so many just like absolute incredible human beings that we've got now in the UK Pink Firefighters. And I'm just remarkably proud of what we are doing, the impact we're trying to have on breast cancer awareness, early intervention, screening, fundraising. It's a real impact. We're using visibility for something way bigger than ourselves. And actually, something else is a hard left-hand turn that surprised me most about this year. I just thought about it from conversations I've been having with some of the UK Pink Firefighter teams recently, is the number of people who have reached out to me privately with messages saying, I thought it was just me, or I never heard someone say that out loud, or that conversation kind of helped me put words to or articulate something that I couldn't really name. That's when I realized, I think, that going out there, putting yourself out there, doing something like the podcast, but like your own version of whatever it is you're doing, isn't just about content or anything like that. It's about space. It's about making space for people to feel heard, a place where people can come to think and not just consume stuff, which I think a lot of us do in the social media world. That responsibility shaped how I try and show up. It's kind of why this episode exists, why it took so long, and why it doesn't particularly feel very tidy as you're listening to this waffle and ramble. Because I'm going to talk about leadership and culture and agency and building a life that fits, I have to live it out loud too, really imperfectly, publicly, humanly, and that's I think what the podcast has become in 2025. Next was a bullet point around looking ahead. So it's important to look back, see the stuff you've done, see the things you've thought about, but also I want this part of the episode to do more than list off stuff we've been doing and plans and events. And there's a lot coming up for us. Like January takes us to Dubai. Yes, there's a firefight stuff we're kicking off in the year. We're going to do some international fire instructor stuff in Australia in February. Going to Atlanta in March, Georgia, to see what the 9/11 holds for us and start to continue to grow that. Those things are exciting. They're opportunities, they're milestones. But for me, looking ahead is more about how I want to live my life, how I want to show up in the world. And maybe some of this will be useful for you. Maybe it's a bit where I lose you. But this past year has taught me a massive amount about gratitude and what actually matters when everything else gets loud. So moving the house twice, building the podcast setups again and again and again, surgeries, physical setbacks, private challenges, professional, honestly, storms that, nearly saw me maybe leave the fire service. And some emotional hits like losing the dogs. Nothing strips life down to essentials faster than a bit of struggle. And when that noise falls away, you realize how powerful minimalism really is. Not in the Instagram aesthetic sense, but more of like a life sense. doing fewer things and doing them well. I used to have a number of different businesses that I was involved with, and I realized I was doing a lot of things a little bit shit, and I wanted to do less things well. So reducing the noise, reducing the clutter, and reducing frantic energy helped me cut back on things that drain me and maybe that drain you, focusing instead on things that make you a bit sharper, a bit calmer, a bit clearer, and maybe a bit more honest. I think busyness is a very, very effective coping mechanism and excuse, because a busy life is not the same as a meaningful life. Most of us are running around like headless chickens, busy fools, convincing ourselves that it counts as progress. And I don't think it does, or I've learned that in my life it doesn't. So next year, I want to lean further into clarity, into being very intentional, into saying no to things that don't fill up my cup or don't fill up the cups of those around me or don't make the boat go faster, take me closer to the things that I say I want to do. So I'm going to lean more into purpose, into deliberate action rather than frantic activity. And one of the things I've asked myself regularly is a simple question. It is beyond a privilege to be able to bring the Fireflies podcast to you, and we are so grateful for every single person that supports, listens, shares, and follows our journey. But here's the honest truth. It takes a colossal amount of time and work to keep the podcast going. And to help us keep doing it, create more, reach more guests internationally, and make the podcast sustainable, we're asking for you to help. And to do this, we've set up a Patreon page. Now, if you've ever wanted to meet a member of the podcast, buy us a beer, buy us a coffee, and you think anything you've ever listened to on the podcast has been worth £3, that's basically what we're asking you for. By joining our Patreon community, you will get access to every single full episode archive we have ever made. Now, hundreds and hundreds of key documents that we've got in there on fire behavior, firefighter health, cancer risks, instant debriefs, and so much more. So if you feel like you want to join the Patreon crew and help us make this possible, head to patreon.com/TFFPC or check the link in any episode podcast notes. Is what I'm doing today, making the boat go faster, comes from a famous book. I can't remember at this moment in time. It was actually like an Olympic world champion, or like a rower. And I think I heard them say it in a speech. But anyway, are my daily actions moving me closer to my stated goals or dragging me further away? Because intentions don't really change your life. Actions do. Lots of people can say they have intentions to do something. I should lose weight. I should spend a bit more time with my partner. I should save a bit more money. I should. Tony Robbins has this thing about shoulding all over yourself. And the gap between what we should do and what we say we want to do and what we are repeatedly doing, that gap is where I think most ambitions, goals, and dreams just quietly die. So ask yourself those same questions is what I would probably suggest. What are the things you walk around saying you're going to do? What are the things that you say you stand for? You say you're a person that does difficult things, but if you look back in the last year, what are the difficult things that you've actually been doing? And I know difficult things live on a spectrum between traveling to North Korea and liberating a country down to the difficult conversation with a partner, with a loved one, with somebody at work. Moving watches could be difficult. Moving stations, moving departments, moving services, leaving the job altogether. Stop doing a behavior that's no longer helping you. Drinking from the bottles that empty us. All of those sorts of things. What do you say you actually value? You say you really value your family, but how much time have you spent with them? And I don't just mean time in a quantitative measure. I mean intentional, purposeful time. Does reality really match it? If not, end of year is an incredible opportunity to start anew. That's why a lot of people have New Year's resolutions. You don't need to change everything. You just need to start acting in alignment with who you say you want to be. Just one habit at a time, one step at a time, one small decision at a time. And I want to encourage you to do that and just give you a moment to talk about friendships, the value of people, near and far. I have a lot of long distance, low maintenance relationships with the podcast that people make me a much better. People have supported me this year through a lot of personal challenges, professional challenges, difficult moments. Can't share all of them here out of respect for those involved, but people who stepped in when I needed them, probably more than they knew. So whether it was the laughter, the calls, the messages, the shoulders, I cry a lot, more than people perhaps know. The guidance good friends are stepping in to give me that scaffolding that keep you standing when life starts shaking the entire structure of your foundation, or it certainly has felt like that way for me. So if there's one lesson this year that is kind of hammered home for me, it's that invest in people who invest in you. Don't be the go-to person for people that you can't go to. You know, hold really close to you those people who bring out the best in you, that are really championing you. Some people want to see you do well, but don't want to see you do better than them. So don't waste energy on relationships that drain the life out of you. I'm not finishing here, but as you start moving and start listening and start transitioning into this part of the episode, I want to carry a little bit of gratitude forward with this bit, and probably a little bit of discipline, to be honest. Less noise, more purpose, fewer distractions and bullshit, stronger boundaries, better habits, deeper friendships and connections, and a commitment to doing things that I said I would do. Because the new year is only really a powerful, significant time if you're willing to become a new version of yourself. Everyone talks about having a breakthrough, but they're not willing to break anything. You know, that's kind of what evolution looks like, if we're honest. It's not very Instagram nice. It's not got a nice video montage to it. It's usually a fumbly long sequence of changes and goodbyes and hitting reset buttons. So 2026 is going to be a big one, not because it's full, which it is, but hopefully because it's more focused. I wanted to talk now about a quote that's been rattling around in my head a lot this year, and it relates to the whole services and sector. Sounds a bit provocative at first, maybe a bit inflammatory, but once you kind of sit with it for a minute, you'll realize it's not meant to be political or emotional. It's not really moral, it's economic, and it kind of has teeth. People keep saying with less people in the sector, there's less interest. Like there's a labor shortage, and this applies to any kind of economist mindset that you speak to. But most of the time, what we really mean is at the current price, we can't persuade enough people to do this work, and we pitch it as a labor shortage. There can't really be, that doesn't really exist. It sounds uncomfortable, but it's honest. In a market economy, all labor has a price. So not in a moral sense, like people aren't widgets to go more widgets in the widget machine, but in a real world sense, that price isn't just wages, it's conditions. How we're asking people to work. If we think we're struggling to get more great people in the UK Fire and Rescue Services, it's dignity, it's flexibility, it's leadership, it's culture. It's the psychic cost of doing the job day in and day out. People aren't doing this maths on a spreadsheet. We're doing it in our real lives. You know, if there were a true shortage in the strict sense, the response would be obvious. Wages would just rise. Conditions would have to improve. Training pipelines would widen. The job would become more attractive until supply met the demand. That's kind of just how markets respond to shortages of any kind of asset. And honestly, people in the market are just assets. There's someone you need to do a job. So like a shortage of fuel or copper or coffee beans or widgets or anything, price moves and then behavior follows. So when we think shortages persist, something else is actually going on. Sometimes wages are too low for what we're asking people to do, for the skill, the risk, the stress, or the responsibility of being involved. And sometimes it's the non-wage costs that I think are crushing people. The long hours, the unpredictable shifts, poor leadership. I can say that in places it is. I think we're not optimizing. I think we're optimizing for managers, not necessarily leaders, but we might talk a bit more about that. Cultural challenges, limited progression, moral injury, I think happens a lot. And none of those appear neatly on a balance sheet. They are just the actual very real cost that some people experience that can either incentivize them or discourage them from joining this sector or perhaps continuing in it. Sometimes organizations are anchored in old assumptions. They want yesterday's labor at yesterday's prices, yet the job has changed tremendously and the world has moved on. Housing costs, childcare, inflation, alternative opportunities, the kind of baseline has changed. The sides of the equation no longer map what they used to be. And sometimes it's the hardest one to hear if the work itself is structured in the way that people no longer want to accept. Again, that's not a shortage of workers, that's a shortage of tolerance. So when someone says nobody wants to seem to work anymore, what they're really saying is nobody wants to work like this for this as much anymore. So I don't think there's a shortage of people that like the concept of being a firefighter or like joining the fire and rescue service. There's only one shortage, and if there's no shortage of jobs people are willing to do at terms that are being offered to them. Once I think we see it that way, and obviously as I fumble and wrestle my way through this, I'm still wrestling with the concept myself about recruitment and retention in the UK Fire and Rescue Service. But the conversation does start to change. Instead of asking why don't people want to do this or why don't people want it as much anymore, which can be said at times, you have to start asking yourself, what would make this worth doing more? That question is dangerous and provocative, I think, because it does force honesty. But I think it's incredibly useful, I think. And I'm thinking more and more about it. I've not got a complete rounded thought on that, but this year has made me think a lot about value, about how that value aligns, and about whether the things we ask of people actually match what we are giving them back, about whether the lives we're building personally and professionally are worth the cost we're asking ourselves and others to pay. And I don't think they're completely abstract ideas anymore. I think they're starting to grow legs, and I think they're living. So I'm going to have some more thought about that, maybe some conversations in the future, but I'll just leave that one there for now. All right. Another thought I've been having is around a lot of incredible people that I spend time with who maybe are hitting invisible ceilings in their own organizations. We have a lot of great people on the podcast, which, they come on and they talk about some of the incredible work they're involved with. And I think that's authentic and I think it's honest. But I think privately, those high performers are hitting some invisible ceilings. And it's another pattern I've been thinking a lot about this year. And it's one I know many of you listening will probably recognize, because if you're still listening to this an hour or so in, then you're probably someone that's trying to push themselves in their organization. You're trying to make a change, and you probably either see yourself as, or others will see you as maybe a high performer. And maybe you feel like you should be getting a few more opportunities, a bit more responsibility, a bit more trust, a bit more space to grow. And maybe when that doesn't happen, the first instinct is usually to look inward and assume we're missing something, that we're not good enough yet, we're not ready, we're not polished, we're not political enough. But sometimes I don't think the issue is capability at all. Sometimes sometimes it's the system, which is a bit of a dissipation of responsibility, because there's not sometimes a lot we can do about the system. But what tends to happen in some organizations is a quiet distortion of reality, because you live inside an unconscious bubble that is your own service, and a middle or a senior manager don't always necessarily reward performance. They can sometimes reward predictability, definitely reward compliance, and they reward people who make life easier, not people who necessarily challenge assumptions or expose cracks in the structure. Sometimes we will say we want people to find efficiencies and stuff like that, but if you don't give them an efficiency they want to look at, they might think you're pointing at a crack. High performers do create movement. They surface problems, they ask awkward questions, and eventually, not always eventually actually, but usually they're trying to raise standards. And that can feel threatening to people whose authority is built more on position than it is perhaps on competence. So instead of developing those individuals, many of which we've had on the podcast, they can sometimes slow them down. And instead of being supported, those people feel a bit managed. Instead of being mentored, they get micromanaged. And over time, not maliciously or intentionally, but I think something really corrosive can happen. And those people can start doubting their own thoughts, their own perceptions. You might be told you're doing well, but nothing actually changes. You might be praised in private and then stalled in public, in practice. You're encouraged to be patient while opportunities quietly pass you by. And that's when people maybe feel a little bit pushed out, or a bit gaslit, not because somebody is openly abusive, but because the reality and messaging don't line up. The words say one thing and yet their actions seem to say another. And the most dangerous part of this, I think, is that a lot of high performers often internalize it. They might leave the sector or the service, or worse, they stay and they just give up. They assume the problem must be them. So maybe they work harder, stay quieter, they smooth their edges, they become less abrasive, they suppress the very traits that made them valuable in the first place. And that's how I think potential change gets suffocated. Most organizations don't consciously try and do this, I don't think, but when leaders are, or when they can at times feel uncomfortable with challenge, maybe actually I'll correct myself there. Sometimes when managers, I don't necessarily think, I think a good leader would be happy with challenge, but when managers are uncomfortable with challenge, or maybe they lack a bit of self-awareness or feel threatened by competence, the system bends around their insecurity unknowingly. And the people who pay the price are the ones with kind of the most to give. And again, I'm just talking about one of 400 people we've had on the podcast. That's the underlying feedback that I get when we're not recording anymore. So if you've ever felt stuck or unheard or quietly pushed to the margins despite doing everything you can, trying to do everything right, you're not imagining it. And equally, if you're in a management or leadership position, this is worth sitting with uncomfortably, because I think we need to be asking the question, or more, the question isn't really, are my people performing? It's, do I create space for people to outgrow me? That's, I think, leaders make leaders and all that sort of jazz. That's kind of what I think is the difference between leadership that multiplies people and helps things grow and expand, and leadership that actually just contains and chips away at the edges of change. MSA are supporting us on today's podcast, and I chose to partner with them because I've been wearing this stuff for nearly 20 years, and they are the global leader in development, manufacture, and supply of incredible, safe products that really protect people, not just our communities out there, but also first responders, most importantly, all over the world. Get yourself over to MSA and have a look at it. The high-performance protective clothing for emergency services responders. They also partner with us on the UK Pink Firefighters. That's because we love them. The helmets with the reflective visor, the F1XF, absolutely epic helmet. And not forgetting how they improve firefighter safety through their connectivity in the connected firefighter platform. MSA are always pushing the envelope, and it's a real privilege to be able to continue to grow our partnership together. So whether it's your PPE, your bunker gear, your helmets, your SCBA, your thermal imaging, your Luna, or your portable gas detection, both of us know that this equipment needs to work. It needs to be high quality, reliable, and dependable in the moment. And that's why I use MSA, because they know what's at stake. Sometimes the most honest realization for me is that your ceiling isn't actually your ability, it's someone else's tolerance for your ability. So sit patiently with that. Maybe that helps some people feel a bit heard. It's just kind of a thought that I've been cultivating and nurturing as things have gone on a little bit. I think this is maybe a good bit to jump into something around learned helplessness in the ranks. Something I've spoken a little bit around before, how agency is embedded in the UK Fire and Rescue Service, because we pride ourselves on courage, readiness, decisiveness in the crisis moments and all that sort of stuff. Yet outside of the immediate emergencies and within our stations, our meetings and our policies, a kind of quieter, more insidious culture can take root, which is one of low agency and learned helplessness. And I don't think it's necessarily an overt doctrine. Nobody pins it to the notice board or mentions it in our inductions, but it is there. It's in the language that we use, the structures we uphold, and kind of the behaviors that we reward or punish. And ironically, while our sector decries the slow space of change, and the lack of innovation, we continue to instill a culture that kind of inhibits the very qualities that foster progress, initiative, ownership, and personal agency. So for people that don't know what it is, low agency, it's not about incompetence, as what people think we're going to. It's about a sense of powerlessness. which emerges when individuals feel their actions won't really make any difference. And it can, and I've seen it, again, heard from guests, that it can manifest in several ways. There's top-down structures that can accidentally discourage grassroots ideas. There's a fear of speaking up, rooted in hierarchical tradition and historical deference to rank. There's a tick box culture, sometimes of compliance-driven leadership that values process over actual outcomes. It's like, oh, well, we followed 27 steps, we must have done it right. But then just like a dead animal falls out at the end of it. And you're like, well, we followed the process, but we didn't even get the outcome we were doing it for, And the myth of this is how it's always been done, is often used to shut down really novel or innovative thinking. Over time, some people, you see this in despondency, the staff can just stop trying. And it really isn't because they don't care. It's because I think they've learned that caring doesn't really lead to change. If they see repeatedly ideas fall into like a bureaucratic void or are met with apathy or decision or derision, like even the most passionate firefighters will eventually just stop offering them. They'll stop throwing pennies into the well if they're not hearing an echo come back. And this in reality is learned helplessness. Where failure to influence any outcomes just kind of leads to resignation or silence. And that comes with an ironic loop, because leadership often laments the lack of innovation, or we might talk about slow progress and passive workforce, which I've heard some people say off recordings, without recognizing the systemic conditions that produce this very state. We look out across our teams and wonder why no one's taken an initiative. Also, while reinforcing a system that makes doing so just feel futile or even dangerous at times for some people. So, leadership, I think in itself in many areas becomes an inherited pattern rather than an earned one. Rank kind of sometimes can follow tenure. The management styles are often copied from those above who we've learned from. We're just an amalgamation of people that have managed us in the past at times. And when this legacy remains unchallenged, we unwittingly perpetuate that low agency across generations. Command and control structures, even when really softened by modern language, get dragged into the workspace and remain command and control at their very core. If we look closely, some of the symptoms of those things are all around. It's staff waiting to be told what to do rather than identifying problems and actually solving them. Little new ideas and pilots, of ideas that never really reach any scale due to internal resistance. Leadership development that's maybe focused on operational command over real people leadership. And then a workforce that hesitates to challenge decisions, like fearing being seen as disruptive or insubordinate rather than innovative. Even sometimes you can see initiatives that are aimed at like improvement, but are often so top heavy and risk averse that they drain any creativity out of those meant to benefit from it. So I think there is a path to like reversing this and reclaiming a bit of agency. And I think we've got to begin by acknowledging the problem, not at just an individual level, but like systemically. So rewarding those who empower others, not just those who perform leadership in formal ways. Building pathways to that leadership that actually value courage, doing something that's genuinely different, not like so open-minded that your brain falls out, but the people skills, over simply time served or rank held or anything like that. I think we can create more safer spaces, which I think is an overused term, but culture that punishes failure doesn't really breed innovation. We need to create a few more frameworks where ideas can be tried, tested, and fail safely and learned from without any like long-term fear of career damage. I think we do a lot of work to try and flatten hierarchies. Obviously, operational command always is required for clear structure, but not every setting does day-to-day station life project work. It should be a welcome place for innovation. It should be a collaborative, like with distributed decision-making. I think we've got to train a bit more agency. I don't really know what that looks like practically, but teaching firefighters and officers to think critically, not just parroting things that they've done before, which I've certainly been guilty of in the past. challenging their assumptions, trying to influence different systems. We don't just need doers, like we need thinkers as well. But it is a very complex system. The fire and rescue service, we exist to solve complex human problems under pressure. And yet, in our day-to-day culture, we have accidentally trained ourselves to look upward, to wait, and then comply. And I think we're moving towards a time when we can change that if we really want innovation and change and progress. We've got to build a culture that invites action, values different voices, and empowers individuals at every level to make things better. Because I think if we don't, we'll just continue like staring dumbfounded at the absence of change, wondering why nobody's moving, whilst we've accidentally taught them to quietly stand still, which, just food for thought. I want to drag this down into the local. So there's something I've thought as well this year about role models. Watch table has always mattered in the fire service. It's where everything's kind of passed on, lessons, culture. It's where we learn what's valued and what kind of isn't. For a lot of us, it's the place where we do look for guidance. And I think we expect to find role models. I've found loads of role models sat at watch tables. People who inspire me, people who remind me of why I joined. But what happens when you look across the table and you don't see anyone who inspires you? Maybe you feel that way. I don't know. I know some people do, some people don't. You've got to find someone that you relate to. But it is a reality more firefighters, I think, are facing, where a lot of great role models sometimes go hand in hand with experience, and a lot of people are retiring from the services. And it can feel uncomfortable, the reality that more firefighters face, if sometimes the culture around the table is a bit tired, maybe it's a bit cynical, maybe it's a bit disengaged. Sometimes the dominant conversations are about getting through the shift rather than any kind of growing or learning or being better. And sometimes even with good people, there's just not examples maybe that you need for you at that stage in your career. So if you don't see the role model across the watch table, it doesn't mean you're lost. It might just mean that you need to widen your field of view a little bit, because I'll guarantee you, because of the incredible people that I've met, there's loads out there. They're full of them. The world is full of them, but you just have to look a bit further afield sometimes. And one of the biggest lessons I've learned through the podcast is that your development is not limited to your station or your watch or even your service. The table is way bigger now. It's global, in fact. So through conversations with firefighters, officers, even chiefs, and thinkers from all over the world, academics, have realized how much wisdom exists beyond our immediate environment. And I encourage you to get involved with that. Some of the voices that have definitely shaped me most of the last year, and people that I've learnt most from, weren't sitting across from me at work. And that's not because I'm not surrounded by incredible people. There's loads of amazing people in my organization. But there's loads of people outside of it as well. And you have to keep looking and keep finding, keep turning over stones. They're on the other side of the world. It might be in a book, it might be in a story shared by someone operating in a completely different system. And if you don't see what you need in front of you, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That kind of inspiration doesn't always come wrapped up in a rank or a title, and it's not right in front of you on the table in a nice, neat bow. Some of the most impressive people I've met every day are just firefighters, the ones who never really cut corners, who treat everyone with respect, who quietly model resilience through their just personal life. Kind of leadership doesn't shout, but it definitely leaves a big fingerprint on me, definitely leaves a mark. And sometimes even that's enough. That's when the hardest shift happens, is, speaking with those people and forcing you to look inwards. So if you can't see a role model you want across the table, you have to ask yourself a tougher question. What kind of person do I want to be? What kind of firefighter do I want to be? What standards do I want to live by, regardless of who's watching? Because before you lead anyone else, you've got to be able to lead yourself. And self-leadership is the foundation of everything, I think. Growth doesn't start when someone else gives you permission to grow. It starts when you decide who you are and who you're becoming. And there's another truth that I've really learned this year. Like, influence is inevitable, not like in the social media influence world, but whether you want it or not, someone is already watching how you turn up. And if you can't find the role model you wish you had, maybe you're being invited to become that person yourself. You don't need a rank to do that. You just need consistency, a bit of integrity, a bit of purpose. Most of the leaders I've interviewed never set out to be role models, I don't think. They just lived by their values and others kind of followed them. One of the most freeing ideas I've taken from this year is that no one has it all figured out. There is no grown up. So stop looking for the perfect role model. Kind of build a mosaic of people instead. Take discipline from one person, compassion from another, maybe vision from somewhere else, and just stitch it all together with the qualities you respect that make that standard that you want. And above all, don't inherit the ceilings of people around you. Just because something hasn't been done before or on your watch or on your station or on your service doesn't mean it can't be done. I've spoken way too many people across the world who refuse to let their immediate environment define what was possible for them. So the watch table is massive. It still matters to me. I love it. It's one of my favorite places in the world. And tradition matters, but it's no longer the only table you can draw from. So if you don't see an example you need across from you, extend your view. Look wider, look deeper, look inward, look outward. When the moment comes, kind of be the example that you wish you had, because you're not going to move forward and the service doesn't move forward on the shoulders of just one role model at one table. It moves forward when each of us individually choose to grow wherever they're seated. Okay, we're going to keep going further down this rabbit hole. If you're still listening in, it's actually January 1st now, which I thought would be weird to carry on doing this. I actually got interrupted halfway through doing this yesterday. So I've literally broke that Parkinson's law and we are now bleeding heavily into 2026. So before we hemorrhage too much more out of 2025, I want to wrap up our last few things. If you're still with me, we're going deeper down the rabbit hole. And I'm not going to apologize for it, because I guess if you're still here listening to this, either your morbid curiosity or you're finding some of it useful. So these next bits are more personal, more ethereal, maybe a bit rah-rah motivational, but it's kind of the inner workings of how I think about stuff. So the next thing I wanted to dig into is something that cut through a lot of the bullshit for me and the noise this year. And it is how we live constantly, even more so now, in a world of being obsessed with comparison, being faster, being stronger, being smarter, more productive, and more accomplished, just kind of being the best. And I've perpetually probably wrestled with that. I've spent years, like most people, chasing that without really questioning why. It just like you get a lot of social recognition for just progressing in a lot of things, whether or not that's really what you want. But the older I get, the more conversations I've had this year, the more I realize I think there's something a lot more powerful than being the best. That's kind of being the only. Firefighters, police officers, and first responders are now stepping into environments wired with more high voltage than ever before. Everything from electric vehicles to solar panels feeding direct current through compromised structures, overhead power lines, and illicit drugs factories with improvised lethal bypasses. Any single strike in the wrong place in this type of environment can turn things fatal very quickly, and that is exactly why we've partnered with Jafco. You already know who Jafco are. They have been relied upon for decades for sturdy, get-the-job-done equipment, and they are not resting on their laurels. They are evolving to face the challenges first responders are handling today through their insulated tool range. These are purpose-built for the scenarios where contact with hidden electrical hazards isn't just possible, it is increasingly likely. Their insulated tools are engineered for real-world abuse and use, designed to keep firefighters, police officers, and all first responders alive in environments where electrification is outpacing policy, equipment, and training. And you know this. This is the kind of innovation our sector needs and the kind of investment organizations should be stepping up to support if we are serious about protecting first responders from fatal consequences. So a massive thank you to Jafco for backing the podcast and backing the crews on the ground. Go check them out, learn what they're doing, and bring that conversation into your service, because this isn't about the future, it's about right now. So there's a concept in a lot of books around being non-fungible, i.e. being the only. So to be non-fungible is to be irreplaceable. Definitely not because you're perfect, because none of us are, and not because you win every comparison, like you hold that metric stick up against other people and you just think you come out on top. That's not what it is either. But it's because what you bring to the table just can't be replicated. I remember when I was going through addiction recovery, and a lot of it was around masking and hiding and feeling guilt around your story. And somebody said to me that your mess is your message. Like, that's the only thing that's really uniquely you. As much as most of us are probably embarrassed by it, that's actually the only thing that is authentically you. You're not perfect. But your story, your experiences, your perspective, your voice, basically the only and the best thing that you can be. Because like the best is it was always actually temporary. There's always someone younger, someone fitter, someone louder, someone cheaper will come along. Trends change, metrics shift, but the only kind of stands alone. It doesn't actually compete. It literally defines the game. At times, I've tried really hard to be the best at a lot of things, and I've won a lot of things that I've pursued in my childhood and adulthood, and winning at a promotion board or winning a challenge competition, getting a gold medal, competing for my country in different things, getting the girl of my dreams that I have now. But like I say, the best is like, well, who decided the metric? You know, the best company, or based on what? What amount of people in it? You know, number of employees, turnover, how long it's been going. You know, the best service in the UK. Based on what? How many incidents they've attended? How few people have left in the last 12 months? How many grievances they had? How many excellence awards they won this year? How many lives they saved? What's the metric? Do you know what I mean? The best can feel impressive. Being the only is what makes you unforgettable. And that's the only real thing you brought with you as well. You know, we spend our life trying to fit in and be like everybody else. When you weren't born to be like everybody else, you're literally very unique. And this year reminded me that sort of non-fungibility it's not just about standing out for attention. It's about standing firmly in who you are, you know, being where your feet are and being unapologetic for it. And I don't mean being unapologetic if you're a dick. I mean, if you really are a dick and everybody says you're a dick, maybe think about that and work on it. But showing up authentically, even when it doesn't fit the mold around you, especially in fact, when it doesn't fit the mold. I've seen it so much in the people that I work with and the people around me, firefighters who don't shout the loudest, but quietly raise the standards and push in some incredible leaders that I've met and some that I work with in the organization I work for, who just don't imitate others. You know, they lead from lived experiences and they just honest about the walking bin fire that might have been parts of their life or parts of their career. And those people who take paths that don't really make sense on paper, but just feel right for them inside, like feel right in their bones. That's kind of what I'm trying to lean more into in 2026 now. I've learned that chasing someone else's version of success, I think, is just exhausting. And ultimately, it's like a continually receding happiness horizon. You just never get to it. The closer you get, the further it just recedes. And also, it pulls you away from your own strengths, trying to be someone else. You're constantly trying to dance to someone else's rhythm. And I don't think it makes you happy. It hasn't made me happy anyway. Because the world doesn't need just like more and more people trying to be the best version of someone else. I think it just needs more people that are willing to be themselves. Like beautifully imperfect, really honest, consistent, just being human. So as I'm now here in the new year, and so are you, because obviously I've not released this yet, so you haven't listened to it yet. Might be the 1st of January when you're listening. I'm going to keep sitting with that question. Not like how do we become the best or how do I become the best, but how do I just become more me? There's a great piece from Jim Carrey in one of his speeches. I think he's talking to a graduate class, and it smacks me in the face every time I hear it, where he says, "Please don't leave me, because I've already abandoned myself." And I wonder how many people are just trying to be the best, to fit in, and they've just progressively moved so far away from everything they originally were, that if the thing they're now trying to cling to were to leave them, they would be lost, because they abandoned themselves ages ago. There's only one of you. That's not a weakness, that's your edge, that's your strength. That's what makes you non-fungible. And that's what makes you matter. I think. Anyway, that's thoughts on that one. Okay, next one. Might be a little bit of a provocative one, but again, it's supposed to encourage you to feel comfortable to question stuff. And it's for me, having spoken to an incredible amount of people on the podcast who I think a lot of them are experts. Some are just in a position, and it's a reflection around when position is mistaken for expertise. So there's one thing I think about sometimes when I'm reflecting after conversations with people. And I think it explains a lot of what many of us maybe experience in our organizations, especially in hierarchical ones like a fire and rescue service. Have you heard of something called the Dunning-Kruger effect? If you haven't, give it a Google. In simple terms, it's a cognitive bias where people with quite limited knowledge or understanding in a particular area overestimate their competence in it. It's not actually, so the sort of documentation and research goes on, it's not because they're arrogant. Definitely not because they're bad people. It's because they don't yet know enough to recognize the gaps in their own understanding. And I think this matters a lot in areas of leadership. In structured organizations, I think our positions can quietly get mistaken for expertise. Like rank, responsibility, seniority, it often creates the impression that someone understands everything beneath their remit, when in reality, a lot of us will know that someone's been for example, a firefighter at so-and-so station for a couple of years. Maybe they became a crew manager on the same station. Then maybe they moved to be a watch manager or sub-officer, or leading firefighter somewhere else. And then before you know it, they'd only really worked at maybe 2 or 3 stations, maybe 1. Or they went through as a firefighter and then actually got a non-operational promotion, stayed in that department for a little while till they became sub-officer, watch commander, and then they were straight up into station officer, area manager, group manager. And they don't really got a breadth of experience. They just did really, really well in some quite narrow elements. And that usually means for me that their understanding for everything that's beneath their remit often isn't accurate. And over time, because of the seniority, people stop questioning, they just stop challenging. And the leader themselves may not even realize that they're operating beyond their depth in certain areas. Again, I don't think it's malicious intent. I think it's just misplaced confidence and the burden of responsibility. And I've seen it take place a lot around conversations and training when there'll be someone who spend a lot of time, enthusiasm in a certain element like fire behavior or well-being or decontamination, innovation, procurement, whatever it might be, people development perhaps. We brought in some great external person around leadership and organizational development. Leaders who are exceptional in one domain, such as operational command, they navigate through the organization into a different role and can unconsciously assume that competence transfers cleanly into every other domain. In reality, it absolutely doesn't. Expertise in the biggest quote marks ever really is contextual. So psychology, culture, leadership, fire behavior science, learning theory, instructor development, they're all kind of disciplines in their own right. Well, not even kind of, they're definitely disciplines in their own right. And holding a position doesn't magically confer mastery over them. And I think when leaders believe they already understand something, one part very, very well, curiosity can sometimes shut down. Not always, but sometimes. Questions about them seem to stop. Dissent feels unnecessary. And new information gets filtered or dismissed because it doesn't seem to align with their existing confidence. And that's when I think leaders can unknowingly become blockers rather than enablers. And again, it's all through good intention, I think. The most effective leaders I think I've spoken to over this year, I think share one trait. They're really deeply aware that they don't know certain things. They seek real expertise rather than assuming it. And they invite challenge rather than just defending their positions as a default. Surrounding themselves with people who are smarter than them in specific areas and actually listen when those people speak up. I think that takes a massive amount of humility. Humility is quite a rare asset, I think, in so many places now. And humility is a lot harder than just authority. I say you do because I said so is really easy. And because of your position, like some people can just do that and it just happens, especially with the large amounts of lack of experience or lack of organizational time in service. People can just get gaslit, or they shine the light of authority on them and they just sort of cower back onto their station or back onto wherever. And I know it sounds like it, but it's not. I'm not criticizing leadership. I sit in a leadership position myself. I'm always trying to hold these mirrors up to myself all of the time, especially when I speak to loads of different experts and I can start thinking I've got some kind of expertise in an area of something just because I've spent 2 hours speaking to somebody. Really doesn't mean I'm an expert, and it means I'm slightly more sort of got more insight. I'm slightly more, not even knowledgeable, but I've had a bit more of an insight into how much I didn't know. Someone said to me ages ago, the more your island of knowledge grows, so does your shore of ignorance. You realize how much you just don't know. You thought you know stuff about something, and then you walk into the room where the stuff belongs, and there's actually the room significantly larger than you thought it was, and it's got 1,000 drawers. And you're like, oh, I don't know anything about this. So trying to think a little bit more and understanding that we are all just human and that sort of human behavior. All of us are vulnerable to this bias, because the moment we stop learning is the moment we start overestimating ourselves. And I think if we want our organizations to continue to evolve, we need leaders who are really comfortable saying, I don't know enough about this yet. And who see that it's not a weakness. It's a real responsibility to say, I don't know a lot about this. I don't think progress gets blocked by any bad people, certainly not in the fireside. I don't think these people are bad. I think it gets blocked by certainty in the wrong places. So if you think it might be useful, go and have a look. Dunning-Kruger effect. I'm not going to give you any links. You can just Google it and sort of take your own interpretations from it. Okay, we're getting to the end. I promise. I've got 5 or 6 more bullet points that I'm trying to lean more into as I'm now into the new year. And there's one small thing which I read when I was down in London. It was just spray painted on a wall, which I thought was weird because it's quite like a woo-woo businessy thing, or maybe like a revolution thing. And it was kind of spray painted on a wall. But I looked at it for ages while I was waiting for a tube. And it just said, what if I stopped thinking so small? And that, again, just hit me. Not in big dramatic moments, but when I'm walking, when I'm training, when it's late at night, I'm driving, or I'm working for ages on the podcast stuff. What would this look like if I wasn't thinking so small? So not small as in unambitious, small as in constrained, shrunk in habit, limited by what feels sensible or safe or socially acceptable. Again, a Jim Carrey thing that sort of relates to this is people who make their decisions out of fear, mostly, that's masquerading as practicality. I've realized that a lot of the ceilings we live under are literally self-imposed, by ourselves. But then also there's a lot of it done by organizations and circumstances. We inherit stuff like that. Some of these limitations are borrowed, quietly self-instilled, and we absorb other people's limits without ever really questioning whether they should apply to us. Thinking small often sounds like being very realistic, almost maybe responsible. It sounds like being mature. You've got your responsibilities in your life. But sometimes it's just fear wearing a sensible coat. And it's crazy that some of the stuff I've even been asked to be included in, be involved in, advise on, travel to. This year's just shown me how often I've framed ideas around what's convenient rather than actually probably what's possible, around what won't upset the system or my organization or the people that I work for or with, rather than what might actually move it forward, around staying inside the familiar lanes instead of asking what happens if I step outside them. And I think the podcast in itself is kind of a stepping outside of the normal lanes thing, but like I think there's further lanes we could step into that would maybe be a bit more impactful. So asking myself, what would this look like if I wasn't thinking so small? Doesn't mean like reckless change, just like punch the throttle and invest all of your money. It just means a bit of honest expansion of thought for me. And I'm obviously saying this on the podcast and maybe introduce you or encourage you to maybe think about it. Giving yourself permission to imagine outcomes that don't fit neatly into the existing structures that you're operating in. What would my work look like if I stopped trying to make it palatable and started trying to make it a bit more true to the things that I really want to do? What would my time look like if I actually designed it intentionally rather than just reactively pacifying everybody in my world? And that doesn't mean abandoning your kids and your partner and your responsibilities. Don't use that as an excuse to call BS on this, but what would my time look like if I actually went about designing it a little bit more? What would my leadership for myself, for my family, for my work, for my team, what would that leadership look like if it wasn't constrained by how it's always been done before? These questions and similar questions and variations of these don't really demand immediate answers. You haven't got to just clutch at something to feel like you're being autonomous and, I'm high agency, bang, I'm going to do this. But just thinking about it, creates space, I think. Create space where better things can start to live and be cultivated and mature. So as we're now in 2026, that's one of the lenses I'm really trying to carry with me. Not necessarily just pushing harder, not even necessarily just doing more, just refusing to shrink ideas prematurely. Because actually, most people think that like a new goal, a new growth, a new idea, a new venture, a new change of direction starts with effort. I don't think it does. I think there's one more step before that. I think it starts with permission. I think it starts with giving yourself permission to do something different. So that's that one. Let's move on to the next. Quick pause because I want to tell you about a new partnership we have with First Tactical. First Tactical builds equipment for people who work when environments are seriously unforgiving. And if you go to their website, you'll find kit is designed specifically for us, for firefighters, for police officers, technical rescue teams, fire investigation, hazmat, hazardous materials teams, urban search and rescue. This is honestly the equipment that you really want to rely on. It's built for real operations, real pressure, long ass days, and I genuinely use this stuff. Here's a few of my favorites. They've got their men's Defender short sleeve. I've got that in black. It's got a huge load of specialized pockets, space for all of our gears, the pads, the pens, all of the stuff. It's got them on the sleeves on both sides. Also got the Defender pants. These have got 28 pockets in total on them. It's mad. Let's be honest, we absolutely love the bags. I use their 25-litre specialist half-day backpack. The shoulder straps as well are strong AF. Like I say, this isn't lifestyle gear. It's built for real world, real operations. We talk about the realities of the job, and First Tactical is just the ideal partnership for us. So go take a look, firsttactical.co.uk. Now back to the show. So let's get we're really into the personal, because I've talked a lot about work stuff, podcast stuff, but most of us are very good at analysing what went wrong in the last year as we look back at it, but we're far less deliberate about understanding what actually made us happy, or I certainly don't, unless I'm looking at a camera roll or a highlight reel or something. And this is something that Mel Robbins does. She did a podcast this year, talks about a sort of end of year roundup, and there's some good ones from Tim Ferriss, there's good ones from Chris Williamson and Tony Robbins, and there's loads out there, just like you can search for stuff. But I did a bit of a thing when I was doing a bit of traveling in London. I was driving to get down there, and it was inviting myself to pause and consider like a couple of questions below. And one of them, kind of the main one, is what things brought you the most happiness this year? Like, after what you've already looked at for this next year and set some goals, what actually made you happiest last year? Not what looked good on paper or the CV, not what earned approval, or not what sounded impressive when you explained it to someone else, but what actually lit you up? Like, what actually really triggered an emotional response? For some people, it might be winning a firefighter challenge. It might be getting a promotion. For others, it actually might have been time with family. I don't think there's a great book called The Regrets of the Dying. And no one on their deathbed said, I wish I'd have worked harder for longer. No one says, I wish I'd have earned more money. Most of the time, they're saying things that, I wish I'd have spent more time with friends. Wish I'd spent more time with family. I wish I'd have traveled and adventured more. So for you, was it time away? Was it time with your partner? Was it like getting lost in deep work in a project? Was it a solo adventure by yourself? Was it actually seeing a friend succeed? Was it trying something completely new and how that lights you up? And the key thing to think about for me is, did it feel fun? Did it energize you? And did you come back fuller than when you went? Did it fill you rather than empty you? Because it's different for all of us, and there isn't a correct answer to any of this. There's no hierarchy of better versions of happiness. It's just being honest. And it's not just like self-indulgent for a high five nostalgia reel. I think it can be instructive as well. If you pay attention to it, it can quietly tell you what you want to do more of. And just as importantly, what you might want to do less of in the next year, as we are in the 1st of January now. So if you pay attention, it quietly tells you what you want to do more of, what you could do less of. And if you really want to live a bit more intentionally, which is what I'm trying to do, me and my missus talk a lot about living with intention. Rarely does it happen by accident. It's not about over planning it necessarily, but it definitely doesn't. It's not built on apologizing for things that brought you joy. I think too many people live half lives because they're embarrassed of what they actually want. They kind of downplay it and rationalize it, delay it, push it to appropriate time in the year, or wait for permission that honestly just never comes because no one's particularly interested in what makes you happy. That's kind of got to be your main thing. And that comes from paying attention, from noticing patterns that make you happy, from being brave enough to say, well, that thing mattered to me, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense or matter to anybody else. That's an important one. And I think you should focus more on it. Second one, which is a little bit harder, and it does need to be, because if you're going to grow, if you want to grow, if you're still listening at this point, you probably want to continue to grow, because that's a big part for me. That's what makes me happy, is feeling growth and development in something. But growth without discomfort, usually just reassurance dressed up with insight. Like, it wasn't really growth. What were the really hard moments this year? Not the ones you joke about, but the ones that still make you pause when you think about them. They felt really heavy, like a conversation you wanted to avoid, tension that you sat in your chest longer than you really wanted it to. And what were the situations you really just never want to repeat? Like the really shit situations. The ones deep down you actually helped create, or at least allowed to continue at the time. And this bit might be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's really, hope should be quite useful. Like, what were the big mistakes? And more importantly, what were your mistakes? So less about pointing fingers, more about pointing thumbs inward. Doesn't mean blaming yourself and catastrophizing for everything that went wrong, because life is messy and not all outcomes are ours to own. But it does mean asking the honest question of, what did I do or not do that contributed to this? Did I stay quiet when I should have spoken up? Did I push when I should have maybe paused and thought about it for a bit? Did I avoid the decision and then just let the decision make itself? Big one is, did I prioritize comfort over clarity? Did I ignore early warning signs? They say a lot of things whisper before they scream. So did you ignore the whispers? Did you ignore the early warning signs because it felt inconvenient to deal with it? So again, circling back to something I spoke about earlier on in this episode, it's not about self-criticism, but for me, it's about a little bit more agency. Because I think as soon as you can start recognizing and understanding your own contribution, you can regain a bit more control. If you did help create it, you can help prevent it as well. And if you did actually allow something to happen, you can set a boundary next time. I think avoiding this question feels kinder in the short term, but really leaning into it is actually way kinder in the long run. So it's not about catastrophizing and replaying mistakes endlessly till you're in a big puddle of tears listening to this, but just try and extract some of the lessons and move forward a little bit lighter, having set those rules, those boundaries. So the deeper bit of that as well is what moments this year really hurt or really frustrated or drained you. And that part of those situations is what you need to own so you don't build and rebuild them again next year. So, bit of a sour point, but that's that one. And if we all did a little bit more of that, it will feed into the culture that we live in every day. Someone said to me, a station manager who I really respect, said to me in a message recently, it was around a different context, but he sent me this sentence, culture eats everything. And I was like, wow, again, another massive gut punch. Culture eats everything. Culture in your house, culture in your life, culture in your friendship group, culture at work. It eats strategy, policy, it eats training, it eats good intentions. You can have the best ideas in the world, best research, you can do the best end of year review, create the best mental toolkit with the best people. But if the culture doesn't support it, none of it survives contact with reality. And I've thought a lot about culture a lot this year. I've had a lot of conversations about it because I've seen it, up close, how powerful it is. And you've all seen it as well. But it's also really subtle. It's not put on a poster on a wall. It's not the values written in the document. It's what gets rewarded, what gets ignored, what gets quietly punished. It's who gets listened to on the watch table. It's what happens when someone asks a difficult question. It's how mistakes are treated in your life or your organization or in your family or in your service or on your station. It's whether curiosity is actually encouraged or labeled as being awkward. And I think the uncomfortable truth is that most cultures aren't deliberately toxic. They just drift and then calcify and slowly become self-protecting rather than growth-orientated. I've seen across lots of different travels and businesses, as I'm sure you have. My situation, my stuff is not special. It's just different to yours, and yours is different to mine. But we've probably all seen cultures where good people stopped offering ideas because they've learned it's easier not to. And that's where innovation gets talked about, but not tolerated. I know this echoes back on something I was kind of speaking about earlier, but I forgot to say about culture eats everything, so I wanted to circle back to it. But I've also seen the opposite, to put it in the positive light. Teams where people feel free to say enough and speak honestly, they challenge things, and it's not taken personally, Their learning is expected, it's not exceptional. People just really want to get better. They move faster, not slower. And there's far fewer catastrophic mistakes because small problems just get surfaced really early. So thinking about how the culture is just 1,000 small moments, it's all the people that I speak to and you speak to. It's like small things, not big stage speeches or grand initiatives from up on high. It's built on how you, me, we, leaders, all of us react when we get challenged, whether people feel safe admitting that they don't know stuff, whether effort is recognized or exploited, whether people actually feel seen and heard or just managed. Culture doesn't just exist in organizations as much as we just try and measure it on a daily basis, which you kind of can. It exists in families, friendships, teams. It exists in your own head. What behaviors I've been tolerating that I secretly resent about myself. Conversations that I'm avoiding that I'm slowly shaping the culture around me. What elements of that am I modeling without even realizing it? Because whether you like it or not, you're always contributing to culture. Things you say, what you don't say, what you ignore, what you excuse. But luckily, it's not fixed. It's not owned by a building or a badge. It's shaped by people, daily, repeatedly, relentlessly. I don't really think you need any rank to influence that culture. You just need to be consistent. So if you want a better culture this year, 2026, it can literally start with you, with behavior, not just with slogans. But one to think about is culture eats everything. So choose carefully what you're going to feed it. Okay, last two things, because we're probably bleeding into just some ridiculous audiobook at some point close to this. Couple of questions to help you stop overthinking. Overthinking's been a massive thing for me in the past year or so and trying to get away from my own foggy, just evil, quite unkind thoughts at times. It's not really helpful. And these come from an author that I've been listening to again. Eyal, I think I'm spelling that wrong. November, India, Romeo, Echo, Yankee, Alpha, Lima. It's got a couple of great books that I strongly encourage you to go and have a listen to. One that I've listened to quite a few times is Indistractable. But anyway, he's got some sentences to help you stop overthinking, and I stole these, so that's why I'm saying who they're from. Number one, don't need certainty to act. That is a really, really big one for me. Like most people, and again, I'm not going to go too far into all of these, but it's elements around you don't need to have all of the answers to know that you can just give yourself permission to do the thing that you want to do. Next one, if it's reversible, you can decide fast. Very few decisions that you make times by zero, like, the concept of times by 3, times by 29, adding 1, taking away 6. As long as you don't times by 0 at any point, you're absolutely fine. And very few decisions are not reversible. So just choose one next step. You don't have to worry about the next 10 steps. That's a big one. Actions create clarity, not thought. Trying to think your way out of a thinking problem is like trying to snort your way out of a cocaine addiction, is a quote I've heard many times. Action really, really helps. So, you can move your way out of thought, but it's hard to think your way out of thought. One thing that I have been using, if my brain is too overactive and it's trying to wrap it up for the day, is if I write it down, my brain can rest. So having a notepad next to the bed has been a hack that I'm usually doing on a regular basis. Another one on a similar theme is I'll let the future me correct rather than the present me freeze, which again means I can just move in the general direction. Doesn't matter if it's the absolute perfect next step. The future me can just correct rather than the present me freezing and doing nothing. Aiming for progress, not perfection. You've probably heard me say many times, don't make progress the enemy of perfect. Don't make good the enemy of great. Something can be a good next best step, hasn't got to be perfect. Telling yourself that you're the kind of person that stops rehearsing stuff and actually starts doing stuff. Because ultimately, if it won't matter in 5 years, it doesn't really matter too much now. It doesn't get much brain space, much head space for me. So just kind of do it. I'd rather be roughly right and in motion rather than stuck trying to create perfect ideas. And to close it out, I want to drag it back into operational context. Says the Firefighters podcast. I am a romantic firefighter. And social media post I saw towards the end of 2025, I loved. It was sent to me by a friend. And the quote that kicked it off was, "Am I doing this the way I would want someone to do it if this was my family waiting for them?" That's something I want to finish this episode with. It's not particularly very clever. It's not really even very technical. And luckily it doesn't require a specific framework or a policy, for God's sake, to put it in action. But I think it should echo through every firefighter's mind, every instructor's mind, every officer in charge's mind, whether you're in training, whether you're at incidents, whether you're in moments of pressure, or whether you're just in the routine moments, is, am I doing this the way I would want someone to do it if this was my family? Not if it was a drill, not if it was an assessment, not if it was a tick box, if it was my partner, if it was my child, my parents, someone I love. Because to someone it is. And for me, maybe for you, that question could cut through everything else. Cuts through the ego, the bullshit, the shortcuts, cuts through the, that'll do, we'll do it after lunch, cuts probably through tradition, just for tradition's sake. And for me, it forces a real pointing the thumb at myself, looking in the mirror, bit of honesty. Because if you frame it that way, most excuses should hopefully evaporate. Yes, it might be a bit harder, but you suddenly care about it a bit more. You care about your preparation. about the standards, about communication, about decision making, about how you show up when it matters. It doesn't mean perfection, but it doesn't mean hesitation. It means intent. It means choosing the standard that you want applied when the stakes are personal, not just abstract, because it could be anybody. It's not anyone that matters to me. I think if we carry that question more consciously in everything we do when we step on station again in 2026, into our training, into our culture, into our leadership, into the way we treat each other, a lot of things will quietly improve without any other policy ever being written or reviewed ever. So as this year starts off, that's the thought I want to leave hanging in the air for me and maybe for you. And I want to do it in a way I'd be comfortable with if it was my family on the other side of the tip sheet, on the other side of the call as we're rolling out the door. So if that answer is yes for you, if you want to be more that as well, then keep going, because ultimately the job isn't really about us. It's about why we joined it. It's about showing up for someone in a way that might be the worst day of their life. And for that, it deserves our absolute best. That's it. I'm calling that the roundup for 2025. It was really long, wasn't it? Hopefully some of it was useful. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe I'll do another one in 12 months' time. Maybe I won't. If you're still listening, I'm guessing you found some of it interesting, or you just thought it was like a weird window into the insight of this person's constant mental spiral and decline. Like, who in their right mind would put this out in a public domain? But I'm not bothered anymore. Like, obviously I care a lot about this thing, but I think all of us will do a better job if we just start being a bit more honest. We're not perfect. We don't have all the answers. Sometimes we sound stupid. Maybe I've sounded stupid for the last 2 hours. But that's honest. That's like who we all are. So let go of the professional avatar. Be more you. I'm going to try and be more me. But kicking off next week, we'll be back to expected normal broadcasting, if you will. I've got Lucy, really great friend of mine, really great guest. I know you're going to love it. Before that, you've got the second part of our episode with Dave Payton and Ian Evans. Those two were epic. Glad we just kind of pinched them in before the end of the year. You're going to love their episodes. And I think you're going to love the one with Lucy. We've got a load of great stuff coming up next year. Hope you're going to stay with us, or this year now as it is. Really appreciate you being here and kind of showing up for yourself. Some of you I know. Some of you I've probably never met, don't know, probably never will meet. But if it's useful for you, let's keep doing it. If you want it to keep happening, last shameless plug, we have a Patreon site. It's £3. Helps me keep doing it because a lot of this stuff costs money. And then I want to go out and keep talking to other people and keep doing it. So if you think we would meet and you would buy me a coffee, then go and give us £3 and we'll keep trying to do it for as long as possible. All right. Love you all. Appreciate you. I'll see you on the other side. Well, that's it for today, folks. Hope you took a lot away from that episode. We started the Firefighters podcast to develop, inspire, connect, motivate, represent, and most importantly, celebrate the world of incredible emergency services operators and the wider sector through this series of wide-ranging conversations. We really love creating this podcast and bringing it to so many people. Did you know you can also find these on YouTube? We do a lot of video podcasts now. You can head over to our YouTube page and follow, subscribe there. And as a final ask from us, whatever platform you're on, please rate the podcast. It really helps us as a key performance indicator to reach more and more people. I've been your host, Pete Wakefield. This has been the Firefighters Podcast. And wherever you are in the world, please stay safe, be happy, live with intention, and where possible, please remember and support your firefighters and first responders. I'll see you next time.